Once, the Aeldari Empire ruled over the galaxy, but due to a fall of their own creation, they are now a dying and splintered race. For those who survived aboard the titanic Craftworlds, like their kindred in Comora or amongst the Harlequin troops, the preservation of their soul from consumption by the deity formed in the fall is imperative. Every Aeldari faction has their own method of avoiding this fate, and the method employed by the Craftworlders has led them to a new breed of warrior, one formed from those preserved souls. It is a concept treated with abhorrence by some, but as their numbers dwindle, even the staunchest of opponents to it realizes the necessity of such warriors and constructions. Built from wraithbone and powered by the spirit stones of the dead, they are collectively known as ghost warriors or wraith constructs, and this is what we know of them. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. It is unclear exactly when the first Wraith Constructs were drawn into service by the Aeldari, but the concept of constructs in their society is ancient indeed. In fact, the Aeldari Empire pre-fall had an entirely automated economy and workforce, with some form of construct handling almost all menial tasks. Some might claim this is part of why they all got bored and ended up causing their own annihilation. However, it is important to stress that Wraith Constructs are far more than automatons, for they are instead both more impressive and more terrifying than even the most advanced AI. And yes, I know the Imperium hates AI, but this is far beyond that even. But you see, a Wraith Construct is the most literal incarnation of the phrase ghost in the machine I have ever come across, for they are piloted by the soul of a long-dead Aeldari whose spirit stone has been placed in the Craftworld's after their death. In times of need, these stones can be removed from the circuit, the nearest thing to safe refuge from the predations of Slaanesh that an Aeldari soul can have these days, to be placed into the body of the construct, with the soul inside going on to animate and control the construct's movements. This process is made possible primarily through the work of Spirit Seers, a unique type of warlock, the lower tier of Aeldari Seer and Battle Psyker, that are able to seemingly bridge the gap between the living and the dead far better than any others. Admittedly, this is still not a simple task by any means. Walking in the spirit world as these seers do is perilous, and it gets harder and harder for them to return to the realm of the living until eventually they never come back at all. Once the Wraith Construct has been inhabited by a pilot, it will remain in that state until it is destroyed. The Spirit Stones are not removed and placed back into the Infinity Circuit between battles, presumably because there is too much risk associated with getting them back out again later. However, the constructs can be shut down, as far as I can tell, to be reawakened or activated when the need arises again for them, though not every construct gets shut down, as I'll demonstrate later. This might sound similar to the Space Marine Dreadnoughts we've discussed in recent logs, who stay bonded with their sarcophagus until death and can sleep when not needed. And the fact that the Wraith Constructs do to some extent maintain a personality would be another link between them. But in my mind, there are a few major differences that mean I don't consider them in the same category. For a start, Wraith Constructs are actually piloted by the dead as opposed to the mortally wounded but still living. There is a reason that their other name is Ghost Warriors after all. This leads to the second major difference. The pilots can survive, and I do use that term loosely, and fight again even if their construct is lost, assuming the Spirit Stone is undamaged. Whereas a Dreadnought pilot can expire, and the hull may be used again as long as it too isn't destroyed. Same principle really, just in reverse for Aeldari versus Astartes. Thirdly and finally, there are the attitudes toward the two groups of War Machine by their respective factions. The Space Marines do not have a universal consensus on Dreadnoughts, ranging from reverence to respect to abhorrence, but the majority of chapters at least understand the idea and show due respect to those fallen warriors. On the other hand, the Aeldari for the most part hate the Ghost Warriors as a concept. The souls themselves are probably shown as much reverence as possible for their willingness to return to the realm of the living and risk their soul being devoured by Slaanesh for the sake of the Craftworld, but the idea of creating them and using them in the first place is reviled even by those who use them. After all, if you take a spirit of a dead person and use it to inhabit something in the mortal realm, that is, to put a long and tragic story short, at its most basic level, necromancy. The spirit steers are specially trained to try and prevent their abilities entrapping them into actually becoming a full-blown necromancer. Such is the fear and abhorrence of the idea. To be honest, it's really no shock. In fact, there are still fierce arguments raging about the use of this technology, but there is one simple premise that overrules almost any challenge to the idea. Needs must. If they don't use the Wraith Constructs, one could arguably say that the Craftworld Aeldari will become extinct, or at least become extinct a heck of a lot faster, since they're a dying race anyway trying to stave off the near inevitable. The best example of that is undoubtedly Craftworld Aeldari, which has been subjected to several devastating invasions over recent millennia and is now arguably more populated by ghost warriors than by living ones. Their ability to survive and present a powerful military force today is now intrinsically tied to the Wraith Constructs, a fact which the Drukhari cousins find absolutely hilarious given the Craftworld's angst over it compared to Comorite irreverence of necromancy. After all, resurrection and regrowth of the dead is kind of standard practice among the homunculus covens. Speaking of Aeldari, as mentioned, we don't know when the first Wraith Constructs were built or conceived, but we think we know how and why. According to legend, rumour, popular belief? Whatever you call it, it is believed that an Aeldari seer became the first ever spirit seer by mentally diving into the Infinity Circuit to be with their lost lover. It is said they realised their purpose to bridge between the worlds of living and dead, but whether they actually built or commissioned the Wraith Constructs in short order afterward, and indeed when this incident even took place, is unknown. The constructs themselves are formed of basically what everything Aeldari built is made from. Wraithbone, a material that is best summed up as condensed warp energy that provides psychic shielding, the means by which the Craftworld survived the fall, as well as incredible resilience and self-repair when aided by the builder caste known as Bone Singers. This means that, whilst they are still pretty elegant by design, the Wraith Constructs are much less lithe and more purposeful than other Aeldari warriors in a war host. After all, they're not sculpted to look like Aeldari warriors, they're war engines. They're not quite the same. There are several variants of Wraith Construct, though conveniently they do all share the word Wraith as part of their name, which makes looking them up much easier. The most commonly seen are also the joint smallest, even though they still tower over the Spirit Seers responsible for their creation and guidance in battle. The Wraith Guard. These bulky constructs are probably the nearest thing to true heavy infantry in an Aeldari force, given the lithe and agile nature of most of their troops, and they carry ranged weapons that channel the psychic energy of the construct's spirit stone to create miniature and short-lived warp rifts. This is understandably devastating for the targets of said weapons, known as Wraith Cannons and D-Scythes, and both are classified as vortex weapons due to their rift-opening abilities, as well as being unusable by any mortal, only the Wraith Constructs. I assume that their mechanical/dead nature means that they're safe from the effects of the weapons, which kind of makes sense given what they do. There isn't a living soul or body to be ripped apart. The Wraith Cannon is probably considered the classic Wraith Guard weapon, and it uses its portal power in a more physical than a metaphysical sense, tearing its target between warp and real space to destroy them. On the other hand, the D-Scythe, D being short for distortion, acts on a spiritual level. There is no visible consequence of the trigger being pulled, but any caught in its short-ranged area of effect pretty much just drop dead then and there. One could make an analogy here to the cutting of the strings of a marionette, and the Aeldari certainly do. The D-Scythe rips the soul from the target's body to kill them, an act known as the cutting of the crone's cord to the Aeldari as a reference to their goddess, the crone Morai Heg. In fact, this act is supposed to be a right exclusively given to Morai Heg, and there are those who still have a taboo denial of D-Scythes and some other distort weapons, such as those found on the Spirit Seer piloted Hemlock Wraithfighter. But I raise again that counter-argument from earlier. Needs must, and militant autarchs are advocating their use despite effectively using spirit power to do a god's work. The Wraith Guard might be the most common Wraith construct, but they are not the only ones of their size, as there is also a melee variant known as the Wraith Blades. They are known in the Aeldari tongue as the Clivolk, but you'll never hear almost any Aeldari say that. They're petrified of inciting the god Kane's wrath just by uttering the word. It's that strong a taboo. It might be considered overkill as an idea, but I can see the thought process. Wraith Blades are constructs inhabited by the angriest and most wrathful of spirits. Their rage so powerful, it may even threaten the sanctity of other Wraith constructs who just want an eventual peaceful rest. As such, the Wraith Blades are kept away from their cousins when not roused to war, and only the most gifted of spirit seers are trusted to awaken them. But whilst many craftworlds, including Biel-Tan, didn't wish to include them in their war hosts, all have been forced to call back to that counter-argument I raised time and time again. There is a subtle construction difference between the Wraith Guard and the Wraith Blades, as the latter are given an extra sensor vein versus the former. It is said that this is an attempt to keep the super mad spirits focused on the task at hand, since vengeance makes one blind, according to the spirit seers. But there are still detractors who claim it is necessary as a means of containing the all-consuming wrath that has taken the spirit of Wraith Blades. Interestingly, the weapons of the Wraith Blades are themselves somewhat sentient, as they are implanted with spirit stones containing malevolent remnant spirits. This is true of both the paired ghost swords, able to guide their own blows toward weak spots, and the more powerful armor-cracking ghost axe that is paired with a force shield for added defense. The next stage up from the Wraith Guard and the Wraith Blades are much larger than those others, the towering yet still somewhat lithe Wraith Lords, constructs requiring the spiritual strength of an exarch to animate them properly. Unlike their smaller cousins, the Wraith Lords have a broad range of war gear available for both close and ranged assault, from the massive ghost glaives, essentially larger ghost swords, to bright lances and star cannons usually only found on Craftworld tanks. This is because the Exarch spirits within were masters of a specific field of warfare from when they walked the path of the warrior in life, and this carries over beyond death into becoming a Wraith Lord. Howling Banshees probably prefer melee, whilst Dark Reapers will likely wield the biggest gun they can get implanted into them. Despite the general angst of the Aeldari towards their actual existence, the Wraith Lords are undoubtedly treated with reverence. They're invited to join war councils from time to time due to their typically vast experience across 2 lifetimes. However, like the other Wraith constructs, they're not all quite there, mentally speaking. By that, I don't mean they're stupid, not at all, but their nature as spirits means that their perception of reality is compromised, and they seem to exist in 2 realms of vision at once. This phenomenon, known as Wraith Sight, makes Wraith Lords and other constructs rather slow and less aware than their Aeldari nature would make you expect, but there is a workaround. The presence or guidance of others, particularly the spirit seers who are best suited to the task, can focus their actions on the battlefield and the here and now. Even if there is no spirit seer guiding them, do not underestimate the power of Wraith Lords, as they can easily tear you apart at any range. And as if that wasn't scary or worrisome enough, consider this: Psyker Wraith Lords. Yes, you did hear me right. There are Wraith Lords whose spirit stones contain the soul of a Psyker, a warlock to be precise. They're known as Wraith Seers, and they're incredibly rare. Apparently there used to be many more of them, probably inside the Yandan ghost houses or something, but they're so uncommon now that it's theorized that spirit seers are no longer able to construct them. No, actually, now that I've mentioned them, I forgot to mention that. Yandan has so many ghost warriors now that entire noble houses are able to be formed or rebuilt using them as the sole members. They're known as ghost houses. And of course, because Aeldari, there is politicking going on. Members of different houses will apparently not fight together, and their personalities are still a thing, even if they may be a bit changed by the years. Getting back on track, above the Wraith Lords, yes, there is another class, there are the only Wraith constructs that not only has multiple pilots, but even has a living one at that. The Wraith Knights. These are behemoths of war engines, armed with weapons capable of besting demonic lords in single combat, but they are more agile than a Wraith Lord, especially those without a guiding Spirit Seer. This is because Wraith Knights are not separated between the real and spirit world in the same way as smaller constructs, for they still have a living pilot, a twin who has forfeited, or perhaps been forced by their Craftworld's desperation to forfeit, their remaining days to share the Wraithbone hull of the war machine with their already dead sibling, whose Spirit Stone provides the power. For those unaware, Aeldari twins have an incredibly close connection that more than borders on telepathy, and when one dies, the other may simply fade into death out of sheer sympathy on occasion. This means that should one outlive the other and the pair be installed into a Wraith Knight, they have an incredible synergy. The entranced yet living twin brings the focus and grace that other Wraith constructs lack, and the soul of their twin and other souls who previously inhabited the construct provide a wise and tight-knit link between pilot and machine that is closer than any human could hope to get with the machine spirit. Whilst the Wraith Knights are undoubtedly most useful in battle, they have a secondary purpose that is perhaps even more critical: the collection of new Spirit Stones. These crystals are made of pure psychic energy and can only be found on the Crone worlds within the Eye of Terror that was once the heartland of the Aeldari Empire. The denizens of these worlds and the fusion of warp and reality make any journey to a Crone world perilous. It speaks volumes of their danger that only the mightiest Wraith constructs are considered up to the task, even in a society such as that of the Aeldari, with incredibly skilled warriors and an ever-increasing need for the technology because, you know, a lot of them are still dying. And there you go, a look into the Wraith constructs and the Spirit Seers of the Aeldari. I realise that this log isn't completely comprehensive, but it should give you an idea about the lengths that the species has gone to just to try and avoid extinction. Who knows, maybe in combination with the Inari it'll be enough to somehow deny their fate that they condemned themselves to, but many of them will look back and doubtless ask, was it all worth it to violate the rest of our dead for this? That question is one I cannot answer because I'm not an Aeldari, but we'll see if fate even allows them to ask it one day. For now though, we must move on. Next time I think we'll continue on the theme of all things mechanical, and go take a look at some places that form the heart of industry in much of the galaxy. Though I would hesitate to call them Imperial worlds, at least I would have had there not been a rather large civil war millennia ago, they are without doubt some of the most vital resources left for humanity. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.